I'd been living full-time in a camper van for a year and a half. The routine suited me. I worked wherever the signal held, then chased small lakes and county roads when it didn't. Solitude was the point. No neighbors, no hallways, no laundry room chatter. Just me, the creak of trees, and a small desk that folded out from the wall. That morning, I followed a forest road that lost confidence the farther I went. Asphalt, then gravel, then two thin ruts wandering between pines. The signal dropped to 1 bar, then none. I should have turned around. I didn't. The sky was clear and the day had long edges. The map showed a tiny pale patch near a stream. A clearing. Perfect. By late afternoon, I rolled into it. Flat ground, needle-soft earth, a ring of tall pines like an audience who had already decided to approve. No fire ring, no trash, no tracks. The place felt unused, the way a room feels before anyone has lived a life in it. I parked with the back of the van facing the densest trees so the sunset would wash the side door. I stepped out and listened. Birds, yes. Wind through needles, yes. In between, a steady hush like distant water that might have only been leaves talking to one another. I set a small table outside, boiled pasta, and sliced an apple. I ate slow. The light turned the trunks copper. A soft breeze stitched the tops of the trees together. I told myself I would sleep early and drive at first light. That was my rule when I pushed far off-road. Arrive calm, leave before curiosity found me. Rules are easy to keep when nothing tests them. Dusk slipped into the clearing. I made coffee and watched the sky darken until the first stars tested their brightness. A moth tapped the window. I cleaned the pot, put everything away, and slid into bed with my book. The van's interior felt small in a safe way, like a shoulder under a blanket. The fridge hummed. My clock read 11:58. At midnight, 2 knuckles touched the side door. Not a scrape, not a branch. A neat, polite double tap. I sat up. The book slid off my chest and landed on the floor with a soft thud. I waited for the second knock. It didn't come. Hello? I kept my voice low. I didn't turn on a light. The dark outside felt like a mirror. When you light yourself, you lose the outside. Silence. The wind had dropped. Even the moth was done. I reached for my flashlight. The van's latch was an old one with a simple interior bolt. No alarm, just hardware and trust. I cracked the door an inch. My light drew a pale line along the dirt. No shoes, no tent stakes, just pine needles and the faint curve of my tire marks. I listened until my ears rang from the effort. Nothing. I shut the door, set the bolt, and lay back down. I told myself it had been a pine cone falling just right. A small animal. Night exaggerates. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I relaxed in degrees. My breathing slowed. The fridge hummed again. A shadow shifted at the back window. It was only the shape of darker dark, a cutout where branches should be. Then it moved, slow and deliberate, from one rear corner to the other, and stopped in the blind spot where my view ended. The roof seam clicked as the van settled. "Hey," a voice said, close enough that I felt it more than heard it. A man. Calm. Low. "You got any food to spare?" I didn't answer at first. My chest ticked like a tight clock. He spoke again. "I'm camping down the trail." The voice carried no hurry, no sorry to bother. It kept even pressure, the way someone speaks when they already know the shape of your answer. I thought about the empty road, the missing bars on my phone, the long stretch of trees with no break. I edged to the door and lifted the blackout curtain a finger's width. My flashlight was off. I let the outside night come in on its own terms. The man stood 3 feet away. Late 40s, maybe. Sun-marked cheeks, a jacket gone to dust at the elbows, shoes caked in old mud. His eyes did not settle on my face. They skimmed the cabinets, the bed frame, the tiny sink. inventory, not greeting. "I can give you leftovers," I said. My voice sounded like someone had whispered instructions into it. I slid a container through the gap. He took it without brushing my fingers, turned, and walked toward the trees. He paused at the edge and tilted his head, not enough to look back, just enough to feel looked at. Then he disappeared. I waited for gratitude that didn't come. I slid the bolt again. The clock read 12:14. I didn't lie down. I turned the van lights off, left the small desk lamp unplugged, and stood at the narrow window near the pillow. After a while, my sight adjusted. The clearing lifted from ink to charcoal. Trunks, branches, the faint line where my rear tires had compressed the earth. He was back at 12:42. I didn't see him arrive. He was simply in place, right side of the van, half covered by a pine facing my window. He stood still long enough for my eyes to doubt themselves, then looked away, then back again, like a lighthouse that had forgotten its schedule. I considered shouting. I did not. In the forest, your voice is a signal flare. It tells everything within earshot where to find you and how you feel about being found. Minutes stretched until they lost names. My hand found the small utility knife I kept near the bed. It felt pointless and necessary at the same time. My phone sat on the shelf with a black face and no bars. I tried the radio for company. Only static lived here. At 1:13, a soft whistle lifted out of the trees. 2 notes, close together. Not a bird. Too neat. The man did not react. He stood like a coat hung on a wrong hook. When fear can't sprint, it sits. I focused on small tasks. I checked the roof vent. I tested the back latch. I counted my breaths to 30 and started again. The clock inched forward. The whistle came again at 2:13, the same 2 notes, a pattern that didn't care if I named it. Around 3 o'clock, the man moved. Not toward me, not away. He traveled the border of the clearing, slow, with long pauses as if reading the ground. At one point, he crouched by my rear bumper. I could not see his hands. I could see his posture, the calm tilt of someone inspecting a shelf he might come back for. Something changed in the dark around 4 o'clock. The temperature dropped a degree I could feel in my teeth. The air thinned. Even the static on the radio settled. I realized I had held the same position for hours. My lower back hummed. My knuckles ached. The man had become a shape my body tracked without needing my eyes. At 5:07, the 2-note whistle sounded closer. Then again, farther. It moved like a question, not a call. The man turned his head for the first time and looked into a part of the trees where I saw nothing at all. He stayed fixed there, as if waiting. Dawn came slow. First the suggestion of color, then the outline of what had been night. The clearing unrolled itself. Needles, stones, my small table folded under the van. The man was gone. He had left in a way that did not remind the ground he weighed anything. I did not open the door right away. I waited until the light filled the space between tree and van, so shadows could not hide inside shadows. I eased the bolt and pushed the door wide, ready to slam it. The forest met me with cool air that smelled like wet bark. Footprints circled the van in a thin path. No tread marks matched my shoes. The prints were patient. They approached the rear doors. They paused by the front wheel. They stood at the small window where my face had been. Here and there, the prints doubled, toe beside toe, as if someone had stood exactly in their own steps for a long time. I walked to the edge of the clearing and found the place where he'd paused with the leftovers. There was no container. There was, however, a tiny arrangement of flat stones in a neat triangle on a stump. I hadn't made it. I had never seen it. The stones were clean, as if washed. When I came back to the van, something tugged at my sleeve. It was a loop of braided grass, no wider than my palm, tucked under the wiper blade. 3 strands, woven tight, tied off with a single knot. No note, no mark. I stood a long time with the door open, weighing choices. Drive now, pack methodically, leave the table, keep the table, say something into the trees, say nothing. The sun touched the high branches. Birds decided the day was safe enough to speak. I packed. I did not turn my back to the trees. I placed the braided loop on the passenger seat because throwing it felt like a rule I didn't want to learn the hard way. When I started the engine, the radio flickered. Not music, not words. A brief, clean hiss, then silence. I eased onto the ruts and took the road back the way I'd come. The clearing narrowed behind me and then was gone in a step of turns and trunks. My hands would not relax on the wheel until the signal returned. A thin bar that felt like someone had found my name and said it out loud. For days I tried to explain it to myself in ways that would make sense to other people. A hungry camper, a strange night, a local custom with stones and braided grass. Easy. Then, 6 mornings later, I found the same loop on the van's rear door handle. I had parked outside a grocery store in a busy town. People were walking dogs. A truck idled 2 spaces over. The loop was new. The knot had been tied while the world looked away for one small moment. I didn't keep that one. I set it on a trash can and drove to a different lot and sat with both hands on the wheel until they stopped shaking. They never caught who was whistling. They never caught anyone at all. There were never any reports, because telling the police what a whistle did to you is hard if no one else heard it. The road pulls at me again now. Part of me wants to go back and sit in the clearing with the sun on the pines and see if quiet will bend the same way. Part of me thinks the stones on that stump were not a hello or a threat, just a rule I had not learned yet. When I check the van at night, I still run my thumb along the wiper blade. Last night, the metal felt smooth, but there was the faintest imprint of 3 thin strands pressed into the dust, as if something had rested there, then changed its mind. I didn't mean to go back. After that night in the clearing, I promised myself I'd stick to public campgrounds, places with rangers and distant laughter, where footsteps mean people, not questions. But promises made in daylight rarely survive long. A month later, my route took me north through the same range. New jobs, new forests. It wasn't defiance. I told myself it was coincidence. Still, when the map offered a shortcut that brushed the edge of the old road, my hands didn't turn the wheel away. The air felt familiar the moment the pines closed in. I could smell the same sap and cold dust, the same hush between wind gusts, as if the forest recognized my tires. I wasn't going back to the clearing, just passing near it. That's what I told myself. Halfway through, the radio flickered. A single hiss, then silence. The exact sound from the morning I left. I laughed it off. Coincidence again. But an hour later, when I stopped to stretch, I found something on the ground near my front tire. A loop of grass, braided. 3 strands. The knot tied differently this time, looser, as if waiting for me to finish it. I placed it on the dashboard, pretending it was a souvenir. The moment I did, the forest seemed to exhale, like a door eased off its hinges. That evening, I parked beside a small lake no one had named on the map. The water was still enough to mirror the first stars. A good place, I thought. Close enough to a dirt track that I could leave quickly, far enough that headlights wouldn't find me. I cooked pasta again, the same simple meal as before, and drank coffee while the light thinned. Every sound felt normal. Frogs, crickets, a soft plop from the lake. I almost forgot to be cautious. At 9:13 p.m., a whistle came from across the water. 2 notes. My cup froze halfway to my lips. It wasn't close, but the pattern was exact. The same pitch, same rhythm, the same small pause after. The whistle didn't belong here any more than it had in that first clearing. I set the cup down quietly, clicked off the lantern, and listened. Nothing else followed. 10 minutes later, I heard it again, this time from behind the van. 2 notes, a pause, then a quiet tap on metal. I turned the lantern back on, stepped outside, and swept the flashlight across the clearing. The beam caught the reflection of the lake. Branches, nothing else. The air felt too still, the way it does before a storm that never arrives. I checked the van's panels, expecting maybe a branch had fallen. On the rear door, near the handle, 3 fingertip smudges curved in a small arc, as if someone had brushed the dust gently, testing it. I wiped them off without thinking, then froze, realizing that meant I'd erased proof something had happened. Back inside, I locked the bolt. Sleep doesn't visit easily when you keep counting minutes. 10:30, 11:02, 11:46. The van creaked each time it cooled, each sound measured against the memory of those 2 notes. At midnight, the forest gave me one more. Not a whistle this time. A hum, low, steady, coming from the trees nearest the lake. It carried a pulse, faintly mechanical, like an engine idling underwater. It rose for a few seconds, then stopped. I opened the curtain an inch. Across the lake, a small light moved between the trunks, too dim for a flashlight, too warm for a phone. It bobbed once, then vanished. When it didn't return, I told myself it was a camper or a lantern caught in the wind. That's how you stay calm out there. You choose the explanations that let you breathe. But as I lay back, I noticed the grass loop on the dashboard. The knot had tightened. I hadn't touched it. Dawn arrived slowly, mist dragging over the lake like someone pulling a blanket. My reflection looked older than a day before. When I stepped outside, dew glazed the van's windows, except for one clear patch on the driver's side. A palm-sized oval wiped clean from the outside. No footprints, no drag marks, nothing in the mud. Only the faintest pair of indentations by the lake, side by side, like someone had stood barefoot, watching the water for a long time. I left quickly. The road felt thinner, the trees too close. Every few miles the radio flickered and hissed once before going silent again. Later that week, parked in a crowded rest stop, I decided to cut the loop of grass apart. I slid the knife blade under the knot. It resisted, then snapped cleanly. The van's headlights blinked off and on by themselves, just once, enough to make a few people nearby glance up. I told myself it was a wiring issue. Still, I kept the cut strands in a small jar by the bed, a reminder to stay cautious. That night, in the middle of the rest stop surrounded by trucks and neon lights, I woke at 2:13 a.m. 2 notes, faint, distant, someone whistling outside, past the glow of the parking lot somewhere beyond the highway fence. I pressed my ear to the van wall. The whistle came again, same notes, same pause, followed by a sound I hadn't heard before, a quiet, deliberate breath, as if the forest itself had learned how to listen back. I stayed off back roads for weeks after the whistle at the rest stop. Cities felt safe again, too loud for whispers, too bright for superstition. But quiet has a way of calling you back. By early autumn, I was driving north again, drawn by work, or maybe by something else I didn't name. My route cut along the edge of a national forest. The trees turned gold there, and the air smelled faintly of iron, like rain that hadn't fallen yet. I pulled into a ranger station for a map and asked about open campsites. The ranger, a man with calm eyes and a voice that carried steady weight, pointed at the far edge of the map. "Most people don't go that deep," he said. "Old fire roads half washed out. You'll lose signal." He paused before folding the map. "You hear whistling out there? Don't answer it." He said it like a half joke, a local warning. I smiled politely and said nothing. That night, I drove until the road ended in pine needles and low fog. The sky was clear above the haze, and for a moment I thought maybe the forest had forgiven me. I parked near a dry creek bed and set up for the night. Small fire, mug of tea, book half read. No strange loops, no sounds, just peace, at least for a while. Around midnight, I felt a vibration through the van's floor. Not movement, a low hum, deep enough to feel in my chest. It pulsed 3 times, then stopped. I switched off the lantern and listened. The hum came again, softer, as though it were underneath the ground, like something large was turning very slowly, far below the surface. Then silence. When I woke at dawn, I found the creek bed damp. No rain overnight, no clouds, but the ground had darkened as if something had moved through it. Not water exactly, more like moisture drawn from below. I packed early. By mid-morning, I was back on the highway. That's when I noticed the radio. It was tuned to static, but every few minutes, beneath the hiss, 2 faint notes would form. The same whistle, distant and tinny, like it was coming from deep under the signal. I turned the volume down. The notes stayed. Soft, persistent. At the next gas stop, I turned the radio off completely. Still, when the engine idled, the sound lingered, so faint I wondered if it had lodged somewhere inside my own hearing. By evening, I reached a town called Wendell's Pass, a handful of cabins, a single diner, and a repair shop that looked older than the road itself. I parked behind the diner, ordered coffee, and asked the waitress, half joking, if people ever whistled out here at night. Her smile faltered. She poured the coffee, eyes on the cup, not me. "Sometimes," she said, "but not lately." "Why?" I told her I'd heard something, left out the parts that would sound unsteady. "Best not to whistle back," she said. "They say it isn't an echo. It's an answer." That night, I slept in the van outside town. Streetlights glowed through thin curtains. The world felt normal again. Until 2:13 a.m., the same minute as before, always 2:13. 2 notes, outside. Soft. Then another sound, low and rhythmic, a sort of distant tapping. I pressed my ear to the van wall. The taps weren't random. They were Morse code. 3 short, 1 long, 1 short. I didn't know what it meant, but the rhythm repeated, exact. I turned on my phone's recorder and captured 10 seconds before it stopped. The recording played back clearly, the whistle, then the coded taps. But in the background, just beneath the noise, a third sound hid in the mix. Breathing. Slow, steady, close to the mic, though I hadn't made a sound. The next morning, I played it again with the window open. The forest around town held perfectly still. Then, faintly from far off, the same whistle, answered by 2 more, different pitches, overlapping like voices trading notes. I followed the sound past the diner and into the tree line. The path narrowed. Mist pooled in hollows where the sun hadn't reached yet. I walked until the road noise vanished, until I realized how quiet it had become. At the base of a cedar tree, half buried in moss, something metal glinted. I brushed away the dirt. It was a small hand-cranked radio, the old kind with a dial and a worn leather strap. Its battery compartment was empty. Still, as I lifted it, the speaker hissed once. Then faintly, 2 notes played, exactly in tune. I dropped it. The sound didn't stop. It came from somewhere deeper in the forest. Not loud, not close, but repeating, calm as breath. I backed away slowly, the kind of slow that keeps branches from snapping. When I reached the van, the recording on my phone had changed. The last 10 seconds now ended with a voice, low, calm, almost gentle. It said, "You left the door open." That night, before going to sleep, I checked every latch twice. But at 2:13 a.m., when the whistle returned, I realized the voice hadn't been wrong. Something had opened, only now it was inside. I stayed off back roads for weeks after the whistle at the rest stop. Cities felt safe again. Too loud for whispers, too bright for superstition. But quiet has a way of calling you back. By early autumn, I was driving north again, drawn by work, or maybe by something else I didn't name. My route cut along the edge of a national forest. The trees turned gold there, and the air smelled faintly of iron, like rain that hadn't fallen yet. I pulled into a ranger station for a map and asked about open campsites. The ranger, a man with calm eyes and a voice that carried steady weight, pointed at the far edge of the map. "Most people don't go that deep," he said. "Old fire roads half washed out. You'll lose signal." He paused before folding the map. "You hear whistling out there? Don't answer it." He said it like a half-joke, a local warning. I smiled politely and said nothing. That night, I drove until the road ended in pine needles and low fog. The sky was clear above the haze, and for a moment I thought maybe the forest had forgiven me. I parked near a dry creek bed and set up for the night. Small fire, mug of tea, book half read. No strange loops, no sounds, just peace, at least for a while. Around midnight, I felt a vibration through the van's floor. Not movement, a low hum, deep enough to feel in my chest. It pulsed 3 times, then stopped. I switched off the lantern and listened. The hum came again, softer, as though it were underneath the ground, like something large was turning very slowly, far below the surface. Then silence. When I woke at dawn, I found the creek bed damp. No rain overnight, no clouds, but the ground had darkened as if something had moved through it. Not water exactly, more like moisture drawn from below. I packed early. By mid-morning, I was back on the highway. That's when I noticed the radio. It was tuned to static, but every few minutes, beneath the hiss, 2 faint notes would form. The same whistle, distant and tinny, like it was coming from deep under the signal. I turned the volume down. The notes stayed. Soft, persistent. At the next gas stop, I turned the radio off completely. Still, when the engine idled, the sound lingered, so faint I wondered if it had lodged somewhere inside my own hearing. By evening, I reached a town called Wendell's Pass, a handful of cabins, a single diner, and a repair shop that looked older than the road itself. I parked behind the diner, ordered coffee, and asked the waitress, half joking, if people ever whistled out here at night. Her smile faltered. She poured the coffee, eyes on the cup, not me. "Sometimes," she said, "but not lately." "Why?" I told her I'd heard something, left out the parts that would sound unsteady. "Best not to whistle back," she said. "They say it isn't an echo. It's an answer." That night, I slept in the van outside town. Streetlights glowed through thin curtains. The world felt normal again. Until 2:13 a.m., the same minute as before, always 2:13. 2 notes, outside. Soft. Then another sound, low and rhythmic, a sort of distant tapping. I pressed my ear to the van wall. The taps weren't random. They were Morse code. 3 short, 1 long, 1 short. I didn't know what it meant, but the rhythm repeated, exact. I turned on my phone's recorder and captured 10 seconds before it stopped. The recording played back clearly, the whistle, then the coded taps. But in the background, just beneath the noise, a third sound hid in the mix. Breathing. Slow, steady, close to the mic, though I hadn't made a sound. The next morning, I played it again with the window open. The forest around town held perfectly still. Then, faintly from far off, the same whistle, answered by 2 more, different pitches, overlapping like voices trading notes. I followed the sound past the diner and into the tree line. The path narrowed. Mist pooled in hollows where the sun hadn't reached yet. I walked until the road noise vanished, until I realized how quiet it had become. At the base of a cedar tree, half buried in moss. Something metal glinted. I brushed away the dirt. It was a small hand-cranked radio, the old kind with a dial and a worn leather strap. Its battery compartment was empty. Still, as I lifted it, the speaker hissed once. Then faintly, 2 notes played, exactly in tune. I dropped it. The sound didn't stop. It came from somewhere deeper in the forest. Not loud, not close, but repeating, calm as breath. I backed away slowly, the kind of slow that keeps branches from snapping. When I reached the van, the recording on my phone had changed. The last 10 seconds now ended with a voice, low, calm, almost gentle. It said, "You left the door open." That night, before going to sleep, I checked every latch twice. But at 2:13 a.m., when the whistle returned, I realized the voice hadn't been wrong. Something had opened, only now it was inside. The dirt on the floor didn't make sense. No footprints, no clumps from shoes, just a fine layer of soil, spread evenly across the van's metal floor like dust. When I brushed it aside, it smelled faintly of cedar and something older, wet and mineral, like stone after a storm. I swept it out with a towel, told myself it was residue from the last trail, but that didn't explain the pattern. 3 thin grooves ran through the dust, evenly spaced, like marks from small fingers tracing parallel lines. That night, I stayed near town again, at a cheap motor lodge where the curtains stuck and the walls hummed with someone else's TV. I told myself the forest couldn't reach me here. Still, at 2:13, I woke to the low hiss of static from my phone. It shouldn't have been playing anything. No apps open, no signal, no Wi-Fi, just a faint sound, 2 notes, then quiet. I shut it off. The sound continued, not from the phone now, but from the hallway outside the motel room. A whistle, soft and careful, like someone testing the air before speaking. I opened the door. The hall was empty, but on the carpet, a single pine needle lay pointed directly toward my room, its tip aimed like an arrow. I left before sunrise. The farther I drove, the heavier the air became. Clouds sat low over the highway, gray and swollen, hiding the ridgelines completely. I passed a sign for an overlook and pulled over. The valley below was filled with fog, white, shifting, alive. It moved like breath across the trees, and for a moment, just before the next gust, I saw something glimmer in it. 3 faint rings of light, suspended above the forest canopy, pulsing once, twice, and gone. I thought of Mara's words. If you hear it twice, you leave by morning. She hadn't said anything about seeing it. By midday, I was 50 miles north. The road narrowed until the trees pressed close enough that branches brushed the mirrors. When I stopped for gas, the station attendant, a woman with weathered hands and a sharp look, noticed the van's mud-caked tires. "Been in the woods, huh?" she asked. "Yeah, near Wendell's Pass." Her eyes flicked to the pine dust still clinging to the doors. She lowered her voice. "You didn't whistle, did you?" I hesitated. "No." "Good," she said, almost a whisper. "That's how it finds your direction." That evening, I parked at a rest stop carved into a hillside. It was empty. Just me, a pair of vending machines, and the sound of wind worrying the trees. I boiled instant soup on the stove, read for a while, and tried not to look at the clock. At 2:13, the van's interior light flickered once. Then the radio clicked on by itself. Not a whistle this time. A voice. It wasn't clear. Male maybe, or something through static. Words layered and distorted, repeating a sentence I couldn't quite understand. I turned the dial to shut it off, but it resisted. The knobs spun freely, the sound staying the same. Finally, I yanked the power cord. Silence. Then, from somewhere outside, the faint scrape of something dragging across the ground, slow, deliberate, circling. I leaned forward to peer through the windshield. There was movement in the tree line. a pale shape bending close to the earth as if studying the ground. When I flicked on the headlights, it straightened and stepped back into shadow. Only one detail caught the light: a hand. And between the fingers, something hanging, a loop of braided grass. At dawn, the van refused to start. Battery full, engine fine. But when I turned the key, there was only silence, followed by a faint tap-tap-tap from the glove box. I opened it. Inside lay the folded note Mara had written. Only now, underneath her words, new lines had appeared, faint but legible, as though written in moisture. "You stayed past the second call." I unfolded it fully. More words trailed below in smaller writing. "Roots remember the weight of footsteps. You cannot leave by road anymore." I stared at the lines until the paper dried and the writing vanished, leaving only blank space. I tried the ignition again. This time the engine caught, but when I looked up, the view outside the windshield wasn't the highway. It was forest. Thick pines, morning fog, no sign of asphalt, just endless green. The same clearing where it had all started, only the trees looked different now, closer, older, listening. I stepped out. The air was colder here, and the ground felt soft, almost breathing. In the center of the clearing, a shallow depression formed a perfect circle. Something metallic glinted at the bottom. I walked closer. It was the hand-cranked radio from Wendell's Pass, half buried again, its dial spinning slowly on its own. 2 notes hummed from it, quieter than ever, almost tender. I bent down and whispered the line Mara had taught me. "The echo belongs to the forest." The radio stopped, completely. The silence that followed was heavier than sound. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. Then, softly, a new noise began. From deep below, rhythmic, pulsing, like a slow heartbeat. The ground under my shoes trembled once, then stilled. I turned to head back toward the van. But where it should have been, there was only more forest. No road, no tracks, just pine and fog. I spun in a slow circle. The air around me rippled, faintly bending the light. And from somewhere within it, the whistle returned, clear, close, and perfectly tuned to my breath. When I finally saw the van again, it wasn't parked. It was standing upright among the trees, half sunken, vines wrapped around its wheels like veins. And through the windshield, something was sitting in the driver's seat. It was smiling, and it was wearing my jacket. The forest held my breath for me. That's the only way I can describe it. Each time I exhaled, the trees seemed to inhale, a strange, steady rhythm, as if we were sharing the same lungs. I stared at the van propped upright between the pines. It shouldn't have been possible. It was tilted back slightly, vines crawling up the tires, moss spreading across the roof like a slow frost. Through the windshield, a figure sat in the driver's seat. The posture was familiar, one hand on the wheel, one resting near the radio. My jacket draped across its shoulders. I called out once. The figure didn't move. I took a step closer, and the air thickened. Not fog exactly, but something between mist and vibration. Then the windshield reflected the trees behind me, and for one heartbeat, the figure inside turned its head to match my movement. Perfectly. Then it was still again. I backed away slowly until my spine touched the bark of a tree. The moment I made contact, the air shifted. A low hum rose from the ground, then stopped. And then I heard a voice. It didn't come from the van, it came from the woods. Calm, low, and steady, like someone trying to speak through a radio tuned slightly off frequency. "You shouldn't have said it," it murmured. "The forest heard you." My throat went dry. "Who are you?" I managed. Silence, then, "You remember the woman, the tower keeper, Mara." I nodded before realizing the forest didn't need gestures. "She's gone now," the voice said. Left her cabin 3 nights ago. Left the door open. You shouldn't have said the words." I gripped the notebook in my bag. The page with her writing felt warm. "The echo belongs to the forest," I whispered. The voice shifted, softening like wind through reeds. "No," it said. "It never belonged. It asked to be heard. You gave it permission." Something about the tone made me stop breathing again. Because it wasn't angry. It sounded tired. "Who are you?" I asked again. "I was the first one to listen," it said. And then, more quietly, "And now so are you." The sound faded, and the forest returned to its usual silence, too complete to be natural. I turned back to the van. The figure inside was gone. The driver's door hung open. No footprints in the soil below. Only the faint smell of cedar and rust. Inside, everything was where I'd left it. The bed unmade. The books stacked on the small shelf. But the clock on the dashboard was working again, blinking the same time over and over. 2:13. I turned the key. The engine started without hesitation. The radio remained silent, but the reflection in the windshield still held that faint shimmer, the ghost of motion where no one sat. I drove anywhere. The path wound between trees, narrow and unrecognizable. Eventually the pines gave way to birch, then to open meadow. By late afternoon, I reached a small cabin overlooking a ravine. An old wooden sign by the gate read, "Wendell Station, closed." It looked like the remnants of one of the research posts Mara had mentioned. The door was unlocked. Inside, dust layered everything in a soft gray skin. I found a wall calendar from 1962. Pinned beside it, a black and white photograph of 3 people standing by a radio tower. One of them was Mara, younger, smiling faintly. The others I didn't recognize, but written in ink across the bottom, "First contact logged, 2:13 a.m. I spent the night inside, unable to face the road again. I lit a small oil lamp and set the radio dial from the wall onto a nearby table. It wasn't connected to anything now, just a relic. But around midnight, the lamp flickered twice. The dial spun on its own. A single click sounded, like a tape recorder pressing play. Then Mara's voice, faint, distant, grainy with static. "If you hear me," she said, "don't answer. They can't tell the difference anymore. They don't know who's speaking." The tape hissed. Her tone wavered, softer now, almost breaking. "They think they're saving us." Static swallowed her words, and when it cleared, another voice replaced hers. Low, slow, familiar. "You don't need to be afraid of me," it said. "You made the forest real again. You gave it breath." The lamp dimmed until the walls vanished into dark. Outside, branches brushed the glass, not from wind, but rhythm. Regular. Measured. When I turned the dial to shut the radio off, the power cord wrapped around my wrist, tightening just enough to hold. And then, beneath the static, a faint heartbeat pulsed. Mine, or something else. By morning, the cord had loosened. The dial sat still. The lamp was cold, but etched into the glass beside me, traced in the thin film of dust, 6 words appeared where my reflection should have been. "You are the next signal." When I stepped outside, the forest below the ridge was moving. Not wind, not fog, but a slow ripple, as if something large and unseen were turning beneath the soil. And through the hum of the trees, I heard my own voice calling my name from far away. When I first heard my own voice echoing from the trees, I froze mid-step. It was distant, not loud enough to mistake for someone standing close, but clear enough that I could hear my name spoken exactly the way I said it. Same inflection, same breath. And the strangest part wasn't the imitation, it was the delay. Every time I whispered hello, the forest waited 5 seconds, then whispered it back. The air around Wendell's station had gone perfectly still. No birds, no insects, not even the faint tick of leaves against each other. It felt like the forest had exhaled and forgotten how to inhale again. I stood at the edge of the ridge, the cabin behind me, the valley below blanketed in slow-moving fog. From this height, I could see the line of pines stretching like dark veins, connecting one end of the valley to the other. And in the hush between my own breaths, I began to notice it. The undersound. It wasn't a noise exactly, more like vibration at the edge of hearing. Low, constant. It seemed to pulse from under the soil, steady as a heartbeat. When I crouched and pressed my palm against the ground, I felt it. A faint tremor that matched my pulse for a few seconds, then shifted out of sync, as if trying to find its own rhythm. I wanted to record it, to prove it was real. But when I turned on my phone, the battery icon flickered and drained in seconds. Every device I had did the same. Camera, radio, GPS, all dead within a minute. Only the van's old analog clock still worked, and it was ticking down toward 2:13. As the minute hand crept closer, the vibration deepened. The floorboards under my feet began to creak in time with the pulse, soft and deliberate. It wasn't an earthquake. It was too measured, too alive. Then, faintly, I heard the whistle again, not from one direction this time, but from everywhere at once, circling through the valley like wind pushed through hollow bark. 2 notes, pause, 2 notes again. But in between the second pair, something new joined in, a whisper layered over the tone. At first I couldn't make out the words, but then they became clearer, as if tuning themselves to the language in my mind. Stay with us. I turned toward the sound. There was no source. The air shimmered slightly, the fog twisting into thin strands that looked almost like shapes of people. Outlines without color, without detail. Each time the whistle repeated, they leaned closer, forming a loose ring around the cabin. No faces, no movement beyond that slow, collective inhale. I stepped back inside and shut the door. The hum didn't stop. It deepened until the glass in the windows began to tremble. The lamp on the desk flickered on by itself, casting a dim yellow glow. And in that trembling light, I saw something written on the wall above the calendar. Words carved into the wood, hidden beneath the dust. The roots remember every listener. The letters looked fresh. The grooves still flaked small curls of wood. I whispered to the empty room, "What are you?" The forest answered in my voice again. You. For a long time I didn't move. The clock ticked closer. 2:11. Then the static began again. Not from the radio this time, from the cabin itself. The wood crackled, hissed, popped. Every beam vibrated like a giant instrument being tuned. I heard my own heartbeat speeding up, blending with the forest's. It was impossible to tell which was which anymore. 2:12. The whistle rose one final time, then split apart. Dozens of overlapping notes weaving into something like breath and music at once. Every window filled with fog until I could see nothing beyond it. The floor beneath me swelled, boards bending outward. The hum turned into rhythm, rhythm into words. Listen long enough, and you become what listens. 2:13. The lamp burst with a quiet pop. Darkness. Then a sound so soft it felt whispered directly into my ear. Breathe with us. I didn't know if it was an invitation or a command. Either way, I obeyed. And the hum eased, the vibration slowed. The walls stopped trembling. When I finally opened my eyes, dawn had returned. The fog thinned. The figures were gone. The air smelled of soil and metal. Everything looked ordinary again, except for the ground. From where I stood, a perfect ring of small impressions circled the cabin, each one the shape of a bare human foot, pressed deep into the earth, each one facing inward. I left that morning. Didn't pack, didn't look back, but halfway down the ridge, I heard it again. Not the whistle, not the hum. Something else. A voice that wasn't quite mine, calling from somewhere below the soil. Don't go yet. I didn't answer, not aloud, but something in me, maybe the part that had started to move in rhythm with the forest, whispered back anyway, I'll return. And the wind sighed through the trees like a quiet thank you. Later that night, miles away, I parked in an open field. When I stepped out to breathe the free air, the dirt underfoot pulsed once, a slow heartbeat rising from below. And the ground whispered my name. By the time I reached the next town, I hadn't slept in 2 days. Every sound had started to feel like a version of the same thing. The hiss of tires, the hum of power lines, even the rattle of coins in my cup holder, all carrying that same slow pulse beneath them. The rhythm of the forest. I parked near a laundromat and sat in the van long after the machine cycles ended. Steam clouded the windows. For the first time in weeks, I thought I might have escaped it. No whistle, no voices, just city noise. But as I folded my clothes, I found pine needles tangled in the fabric. Dozens of them, still damp. I stared at them for a long time. Then I noticed the wall-mounted television in the corner of the laundromat. The news was muted, but I could see the caption. Local woman missing, former fire tower keeper. Mara. The photo was old, maybe 10 years younger than the woman I'd met. Below it, text scrolled about, abandoned equipment found near Wendell Station. No details, no confirmation, and yet, I knew. The forest had taken her. Or maybe she had gone willingly. I stepped outside. The air smelled like rain and pine, though there were no trees for miles. Across the street, a small radio repair shop stood with its lights still on. Through the window, I saw a man hunched over a workbench, soldering something that sparked like fireflies. I crossed over. A bell above the door chimed softly. The man looked up. He was older, thin, with silver hair tied back and eyes that didn't quite settle on you when he spoke. You brought the sound with you, he said. I froze. What sound? He smiled faintly. Don't worry. It's not the first time. He motioned toward the back of the shop. Old radios lined the shelves. Big wooden sets, small metal receivers, some so ancient they still carried stickers from the military. Each one hummed faintly, tuned to nothing. Everyone who comes through this valley hears it eventually, he said. The ones who listen too long start to change. The frequency replays what it remembers. He opened a drawer and pulled out a small black device, handheld, shaped like a tape recorder. Try this. I hesitated. What is it? He shrugged. A filter. It lets you hear the difference between what's there and what's repeating. I pressed record. The machine hissed softly, then went silent. Ask a question, he said. So I did. What happened to Mara? For several seconds, there was nothing. Then, faintly through the speaker, found the door open. I looked at him. He didn't move. Try another, he said quietly. What does the forest want? The static thickened, then parted just enough for words to slip through. It wants to be remembered. He reached across the counter and pressed stop. Don't use it again, he said. Once it knows you're listening, it will answer everything, even questions you never asked. He placed the recorder back in my hands anyway. Sometimes it tells the truth, he added. That's the dangerous part. That night I drove until the highway turned back into gravel. I don't remember choosing a direction, only following the faint rhythm under the tires. I stopped near an old bridge crossing a shallow creek. The moonlight caught the water and split it into thin silver threads. I set the recorder on the hood and pressed play. The hiss began again. Then layered under it, voices, not one but many, overlapping like wind through dry reeds. I couldn't tell which were real and which were echoes. One rose above the rest, familiar. Mara. "You opened it," she said. "It's awake now. It's been waiting since the first frequency test. You just helped it remember the sound of being alive." The voice trembled, not fear, but fatigue. "It doesn't kill people," she said softly. "It keeps them. It turns them into part of its signal. That's why you can still hear me." The static grew louder, then her voice again. "Don't let it finish your name." The recording clicked off. I turned it over in my hands, heart pounding. There was no battery compartment, no power light, nothing that could make it run. I looked up. The trees on the other side of the creek had shifted, not swaying, but changing direction, all leaning slightly toward me. And through the hush, something whispered the first half of my name. Only half, then stopped, waiting for me to answer. I didn't. I threw the recorder into the creek and backed toward the van. The sound didn't stop. If anything, it grew clearer, as if the water itself had learned how to speak. Every droplet seemed to carry the same faint phrase, repeated endlessly. "Remember us. Remember us. Remember us." The words layered until they turned into hum, until I couldn't tell if they were echoing or breathing. By sunrise, I was miles away. But when I checked the passenger seat, the recorder was there, dry, warm, still playing. Only one voice this time. Mine. Repeating a phrase I didn't remember saying. "We are almost the same now." When I pulled onto the next stretch of road, every tree I passed leaned slightly inward, like 1,000 heads bowing to listen. And from somewhere in the hum of the engine, a second heartbeat started to match my own. The morning after I found the recorder in the passenger seat, I decided I was done. Done with back roads, done with the forest, done pretending I understood what any of it wanted. The sky was pale gray, washed out. The kind of sky that looks empty, but hides everything behind it. The van hummed beneath me, steady, real. It was the first sound in days that didn't feel borrowed. The road wound through low hills, the trees thinning out the farther I drove. Soon, pine gave way to farmland, open, forgiving space. The hum I'd carried in my bones began to fade. For the first time in weeks, I could hear nothing but the honest noises of a machine. Tires, engine, wind. My heartbeat quieted. By noon, I reached a diner on the edge of a town called Hollow Bend. The name should have worried me, but it didn't. The parking lot was half full. Normal life, coffee, conversations, clinking plates. Inside, the waitress smiled like she'd been waiting for me. "Long drive?" she asked. I nodded. "Just trying to get out of the forest." Her smile didn't change, but her eyes flicked toward the window. "Sometimes the forest follows people home," she said softly, then turned to refill another customer's cup. I told myself she didn't mean anything by it. I ate slow, then ordered coffee to go. When she brought it, she slid a small folded napkin under the cup. Written on it, in blue ink, "Don't stop when you hear it again." I looked up, but she was already helping someone else. The highway stretched wide and clear. Fields on both sides, pale gold in the late light. The sense of openness should have comforted me. But the longer I drove, the more wrong the horizon began to feel. The line between land and sky shimmered, like heat, but cooler. It flickered once, then stilled. I turned on the radio for company, static at first. Then faintly, music, old folk tune. No lyrics, just strings. It sounded human, warm. I let it play. After a while, I realized it wasn't coming from any station. The display was blank, no frequency number. Still, it was beautiful. I drove for hours with that melody wrapping around the sound of the tires, soft and harmless. When dusk settled, I began to believe it was over. The forest had let me go. Maybe it had only wanted to be remembered. I stopped at a roadside motel, the kind with faded doors and a humming ice machine. Room 6 smelled faintly of pine cleaner and old carpet. The TV barely worked. Perfect. For the first time in days, I fell asleep easily. I woke at 2:13 a.m., but there was no sound this time. No hum, no whistle. Just deep, total silence. Even the refrigerator had stopped. When I sat up, I realized I could see my breath. The air in the room was freezing, though the heater light glowed red. I rubbed my arms and turned toward the window. Outside, the parking lot was empty. No cars, no lights from the highway. Only trees, tall, dark, and much too close to the building. I stumbled back from the glass, heart pounding. The reflection caught me, pale face, eyes wide. Behind my reflection, just at the edge of the window's surface, another shape stood in the same position. It wore my jacket. It breathed when I did, but it didn't blink. I turned on the bedside lamp. The reflection blinked back into normal. Just me again. The trees outside still and quiet. I sat for a long time before turning the lamp off. When I did, the radio by the bed clicked on by itself. That same melody played. Soft strings, warm and gentle. But halfway through the tune, a whisper wove underneath it. So faint it could have been imagined. Keep driving. I didn't wait to see what else it would say. I grabbed my bag, my keys, and ran to the van. The parking lot was full again. Other cars, lights glowing faintly from the office. The trees gone, just asphalt and stars. I drove until sunrise, didn't stop for gas, didn't look in the mirrors. By morning, I found myself back on the same stretch of road I'd taken weeks ago, the turnoff to Wendell's Pass only a few miles ahead. But something was different. The air felt calm, the hum was gone, the forest still. I pulled over at a rest stop and stepped out. The sky was bright, the sound of birds finally returned. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace. I sat on a bench, sipped the last of my coffee, and laughed at myself. It was over. I had survived it. I was free. That's when I noticed the inscription carved into the bench's wooden slat. It was faint, half worn by weather, but still readable. The ones who think it's over always stop here. My laughter caught in my throat. A breeze stirred the leaves, carrying a sound that was almost, but not quite, a sigh. I turned slowly toward the trees. No movement, no shadow, no voice. Then, from somewhere deep in the forest, 2 notes answered the wind. Low, patient, familiar, the same as before. But this time, softer, closer, and perfectly in tune with my breath. The van's engine turned over easily when I started it, but the GPS displayed only one word where the map should have been: home. And in the reflection of the GPS screen still glowed. One word, home. No coordinates, no distance, just that single direction. For a moment it felt like comfort. After everything, the hum, the whistle, the static, I wanted to believe that maybe this was the forest's way of letting me go. So I followed it. The road stretched ahead, perfectly smooth. Too smooth. The kind of asphalt that doesn't exist outside of dreams or government funding. The trees on both sides leaned slightly inward, their branches just high enough not to touch the roof. Each one looked the same, perfectly spaced, as if placed by hand. After 20 minutes, I realized the gas gauge hadn't moved. Neither had the clock. 2:13. It had frozen again. I laughed under my breath. Maybe I was dreaming. Maybe I'd fallen asleep at that diner and none of this was real. The air in the van smelled faintly of pine sap and wet soil. My forest following me, even here. After another mile, I saw the first sign. It was small, wooden, nailed to a post by the side of the road. White paint, hand-lettered. Don't stop when you hear it again. the waitress's handwriting. I slowed down, heart tapping against the steering wheel. The sign passed behind me and disappeared into the mirror, swallowed by distance that shouldn't have been that deep. 5 minutes later, another sign. This one older, the paint flaked away, words barely legible. "The echo belongs to the forest." Mara's words. The GPS chimed once. The screen flickered. Then, instead of home, 3 dots appeared, blinking, waiting. The road bent right, then right again, then right once more. And when I looked at the horizon, I saw something that made my stomach drop. The sun hadn't moved. It hung in the exact same spot, bright and steady, caught between morning and noon. I stopped the van, stepped outside. The air was still, completely still. The sound of my shoes on the asphalt was swallowed immediately. No echo, no delay. I called out. Nothing came back. Even my own breath seemed to vanish before it reached the trees. I climbed back into the van and checked my phone. The battery was dead again, but on the black screen, reflected faintly, was movement. Something sitting in the passenger seat, its head tilted slightly, smiling faintly. When I turned, the seat was empty. I started driving again, this time faster. Trees blurred. The road stayed the same bend, the same curve, the same sunlight. Eventually, I saw another sign ahead, this one newer. White paint, neat letters. Almost home? Beneath it, something had been scratched into the wood with a knife. 3 small vertical lines. A mark I'd seen before, drawn through the dirt in the van, carved into the cabin wall, traced in dust on glass. 3 lines, 3 strands of grass, the forest's signature. I hit the brakes and climbed out again, walked up to the sign, touched the grooves. They were fresh. The wood still warm from the sun or something else. When I turned back to the van, the driver's door was open, and from the radio faintly came my voice. "Keep driving." The same words the whisper had told me in the motel room. But this time, the tone was wrong. Too flat, too even, like a recording. I stepped closer. The radio light flickered, then dimmed. The voice continued, calmer now. "Keep driving. Keep driving. You're almost home." Each repetition overlapped until it wasn't language anymore, just rhythm, breath, a low hum that filled the whole van. And then, between those layers, a different sound, something like wind moving through pipes. The forest's voice, it said, "Stop." Everything went still. The hum ended. The radio died. And for the first time since this began, I realized I didn't want to go home, because maybe I already was. I drove backward, turned the van around and accelerated the opposite way. The road behind me looked identical, but I didn't care. I kept driving until the trees broke apart and a shape appeared ahead, a rusted metal tower rising from a hill. The old fire lookout, Mara's tower. I parked at the base and climbed. The ladder creaked but held. When I reached the top, the view spread in every direction. Endless trees, no road, no van, just the forest breathing slow. Inside the tower cabin sat a table covered in old notebooks. The top one lay open. Names filled the page. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, each one followed by a time. Every time read 213. At the bottom of the list, a fresh line waited. My name, blank time. I picked up the pencil beside it. Before I could move, the forest exhaled. A low, steady hum rolled through the trees, shaking the tower gently. The pencil twitched in my hand. The tip dragged across the page on its own. Numbers formed. 213. I dropped the pencil and backed toward the door. Below, the forest moved, not in the wind, but like breath under skin. The soil rippled, the trees leaned. Every branch pointed toward the tower, and then the sound began again. The whistle, 2 notes. Slow, gentle, Not calling this time, thanking. When I looked back at the notebook, my name had vanished. In its place, written in neat black lines, were 3 words. You never left. The wind at the top of Mara's tower was colder than it should have been. Every gust came from below, like breath rising through the trees. I stood over the notebook, staring at the words. You never left. For a long moment, I didn't move. Then I tore the page free and stuffed it into my jacket. When I stepped outside, the horizon tilted slightly, subtle enough that it might have been in my head. The forest stretched endless, its treetops swaying in slow rhythm, a tide of green breathing beneath the clouds. I climbed down the ladder, one rung at a time, trying not to look directly at the ground. Halfway down, the hum returned. Soft calm, so low it blended with the beat of my heart. It wasn't coming from the forest this time. It was coming from me. Each time I exhaled, the hum deepened. Each inhale thinned it, the 2 rhythms merging like waves meeting on a shore. When I reached the bottom, the van was gone. No tracks, no scent of fuel. Just the faint smell of sap and wet dirt. The only thing left behind was the small black recorder, the one I'd thrown into the creek, the one that had reappeared. It sat upright in the grass, red light blinking, still recording. I crouched, hand trembling, and pressed play. Static, then my voice, calm, measured. You've almost finished remembering. I shut it off, threw it again, this time as far as I could, then turned and started walking down the hill. Every step I took, the ground pulsed once beneath my boot. A slow heartbeat, not mine, the forest's. By the time I reached the bottom, the hum had spread. It wasn't underfoot anymore. It was in the air, in the hollow between sounds. Even my thoughts seemed to echo. That's when I noticed it, the smell of pine and something faintly metallic, the same as the clearing that first night. And in the trees ahead, the faint outline of the van, back where it had always been, doors open, headlights off, waiting. I didn't want to go near it. But the longer I stood still, the closer it seemed to come, not moving, just becoming nearer. I blinked, and the distance between us had shrunk by half. I blinked again, and it was 10 feet away. One more breath, and it stood in front of me, silent and harmless, as if it had been there the whole time. Inside, the seats were clean. No vines, no dust, only the faint scent of pine needles. The ignition key sat in the cup holder. The clock on the dashboard read 2:12. I climbed in. For a second, I thought maybe this was it, the last test. If I turned the key before the minute changed, maybe I could leave. If not, I'd stay forever. The hum grew stronger, vibrating through the frame. The second hand ticked once. 2:13. The engine started itself. The radio clicked on, tuned to silence. And then, quietly, a voice spoke through the speakers. Mara's voice. "Don't fight it," she said. "It's not trying to trap you. It's trying to finish what you began." The van shuddered, as though breathing with her words. Every light on the dashboard flickered, then steadied. Through the windshield, I saw the road ahead, a path cut perfectly through the trees, glowing faintly at the edges. "You gave it form," Mara said. "Now it wants memory." That's all it ever wanted. A name, a sound, a witness. The hum thickened until it was no longer a sound, but pressure, gentle but heavy, like being underwater. My ears popped. The trees outside leaned closer, their branches bending toward the van until they formed a tunnel of green and gold light. "Drive," Mara whispered. I did. The tires rolled forward without resistance. The forest parted just enough to let me through, closing silently behind me. Every mile I passed, the hum lessened, fading into a single note. For the first time, I felt peace. The air smelled clean again. The road widened, The light softened. I thought maybe she'd been right. Maybe I'd done what the forest wanted. Given it an ending. Given it someone to remember. I drove for what felt like hours. The dashboard clock still read 2:13, but the sun had risen. Then, faintly from behind me, through the open window, I heard it. 2 notes, soft, close. I looked in the mirror. The road behind was empty, except for the tree line, bending inward again, leaning toward the van, following. Each tree swayed once, perfectly in rhythm. 1,000 slow nods, all timed to the same invisible heartbeat, all saying the same thing without words. We're coming with you. By dusk, the world had changed again. The forest no longer behind me, but beside, on both sides of the road. The hum returning, faint, then firm. The radio crackled once more. This time my voice came through, not Mara's. "Almost home," it said. I wanted to turn the radio off, but the knob wouldn't move. My reflection in the windshield smiled faintly back at me, the same smile I'd seen in the driver's seat weeks ago. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't afraid. The hum didn't feel threatening anymore. It felt like breathing, like something that had always been there, waiting for me to stop running long enough to notice. The forest didn't chase me anymore. It just followed, quietly, as though it understood that I would never leave it now. Somewhere behind me, the whistle began again. But this time, when it called my name, I answered, and the air around me sighed in relief. When night finally came, the headlights caught something at the edge of the road, a small wooden sign, freshly painted. It read, "Welcome home," and beneath it, carved into the wood, 3 small grooves. The sign said, "Welcome home." Its paint was still wet, glistening faintly in the van's headlights. The road behind me was gone, replaced by a soft, rippling fog that breathed in time with the hum in my chest. For a long moment, I didn't move. Then I turned off the engine. The forest exhaled. Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was full of small, living sounds, the shifting of roots, the brush of leaves, the faint sigh of the air as if the whole valley were adjusting itself to my stillness. When I stepped out, the headlights dimmed, and the forest lightened. The trees weren't the dark, towering shapes I remembered. Their bark shimmered faintly, veins of silver running through them like moonlight trapped under skin. Every few feet, a low hum pulsed beneath the soil, a heartbeat I could feel, not here. At the base of the nearest tree, something waited, a loop of braided grass, 3 strands. The first sign I'd ever found returned to me at the end. I bent down and picked it up. The texture was soft, almost warm. Inside the loop, something faintly glowed, a flicker of light like a heartbeat seen through thin cloth. When I looked closer, I realized the glow pulsed in sync with mine. The air grew heavier but not threatening. It felt like a question waiting for an answer. I turned in a slow circle. Everywhere I looked, the forest was moving, quietly, slowly, leaning in without stepping closer. The same rhythm as breath. Then, from among the trees, I heard her voice. Mara's, faint but calm. "You kept the sound alive," she said. "It remembers you now. It knows your shape, your breath, your name." I swallowed hard. "What does it want from me?" "It doesn't want anything," she said. "It wants to rest. It needs someone to remember it the way it truly is, not as something to fear, but something that was once alive." Her words echoed softly through the pines, bending the air between us. "It can't fade until the last listener lets it go." I looked down at the braided loop again. The glow had brightened, pulsing with a quiet urgency. "So what happens if I let it go?" I asked. The hum deepened. The wind fell completely still. And somewhere within that stillness, the forest answered, not in words but in feeling. Warmth, relief, acceptance. I walked to the center of the clearing, the same clearing where it all began. the same dirt that once held footprints around the van, the same circle where I'd first heard the whistle. In the center, a shallow hollow had formed, perfectly round. The soil there shimmered faintly, waiting. I knelt and placed the loop in the hollow. It fit naturally, like it had been made for this spot. The glow brightened once more, then sank into the earth. The hum followed it, fading downward until there was nothing left but quiet. Not silence, real quiet. The kind that belongs to the living world. Wind, birds, breath. When I looked up, the trees had changed. Their trunks no longer leaned inward. They stood tall, still, proud. The air smelled clean. Rain, moss, and faint smoke from somewhere far away. I took one last look at the place that had followed me across miles, through signals and songs and memory. It looked small now, peaceful, almost ordinary. On the walk back to the road, I found the van parked exactly where I'd left it months before. Same dents, same pine dust, but it felt lighter, as if the air inside had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. The clock on the dashboard worked again. 7:18 a.m. For the first time, the hands moved. I started the engine. The radio hummed to life, only static, thin and harmless. Then, faintly, one last whistle, 2 notes, soft content, a goodbye. I drove until the trees thinned and the sky opened wide above me. Fields replaced forest. Dirt gave way to road. And for the first time since that summer began, I realized what the forest had been trying to say all along. It wasn't a warning. It was a memory. Something once human, now echoing through the roots, trying not to be forgotten. And I hadn't been trapped inside it. It had been trapped inside me. All it needed was for someone to listen. When I stopped for fuel miles later, I checked the rearview mirror out of habit. The forest was gone, just open road behind me. But for a moment before I blinked, I saw something small hanging from the rearview mirror. 3 strands of grass braided together, swaying gently in rhythm with the motion of the van. And from deep in the hum of the tires, faint but certain, I heard the forest's final whisper, "Thank you for remembering." Now, every night when I park somewhere new, I listen for the wind. Sometimes it carries a sound, 2 soft notes far away, and I smile. Because some echoes don't mean danger. They mean you're not alone anymore.